Hey guys, and welcome to Anchor to Truth. Tonight we are picking up in part 2 of chapter 8 in the book of Jubilees. So let's get started.
All right. Thank you, Kyle. Let's go ahead and get started in verse 16 of chapter 8. And it says in verse 16, it says, "And it extended towards the east till it reacheth the Garden of Eden, to the south thereof, to the south, and from the east of the whole land of Eden, and of the whole cast, it turneth to the east, and proceedeth till it reaches the east of the mountain named Rapha. And it descendeth to the bank of the mouth of the river Tina. This portion came forth by lot for Shem and his sons, that they should possess it forever until his generations forevermore. And Noah rejoiced that this portion came forth for Shem and for his sons, and he remembered that all that he had spoken with his mouth in prophecy, for he had said, Blessed be Yahuwah, Elohim of Shem, and may Yahuwah dwell in the dwelling of Shem." Verse 19, he says, "And he knew that the Garden of Eden is a holy of holies, and the dwelling of Yahuwah, and Mount Sinai, the center of the desert, and Mount Zion, the center of the navel of the earth. These three were created as holy places facing each other. And he blessed the El of Elohim, who had put the word of Yahuwah into his mouth, and Yahuwah forevermore."
All right. "And it extends towards the east till it reacheth the Garden of Eden." So again, we're getting some geographical locations here, and it's going to get very specific here, but we are talking about the Garden of Eden. Most people would think, and I know I did as well for a long time, that the Garden of Eden was located in the geographical area of what we consider to be Israel. However, based on what we're reading here, this is giving us a completely different picture than the geographical landmass of Israel. So I think that's pretty important to note.
Well, right off the rip, I kind of see a interesting, like you said, location and a direction. It says reaches to the east, and I kind of wonder in my own head, east doesn't have an end point. If we're just kind of looking at how far it could go till there's the end of east. So it really makes you wonder how far east, or how big was it initially, or how big is it? In regard to what it's speaking of here. That's something I don't think we get quite an answer for, but we do kind of, again, like Kyle was saying, get an area, a direction. We kind of at least get a better understanding than what we've ever had reading just out of Genesis, or some of the other books that bring up the Garden of Eden.
Well, remember that we do have all this information prior to it that's telling us we've got the Egyptian Sea mentioned. We've got the River Gihon. We've got all of these references that are given prior to, that's given us navel of the earth, right? Center of the earth, that sort of stuff. So when we look at the circle of the earth and we look at the center of the earth, that gives us a geographical location. If we're taking that literal, to start looking in the area of what we would consider to be the North Pole, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we, based off of what this is saying, and we just take it for what it says, we would have to come off of that to base our directions and where these waters are going and that sort of thing.
Yeah, my chime in on this, guys, would be that, I think what we've been taught is not what it was. This would be, put it very simple, is, there, and we have to also remember that the geography of the land changed after the flood.
That's
And
right.
so, it's noted in the book that we're reading out of that, when the Bible's speaking of any flood rivers or any rivers, this isn't like in the note on the right-hand side, Kyle, if you'll scroll down to right there where it says pre-flood river on the right-hand side from Eden. Go down a little bit further. It says right there, it says note in Genesis 2:5. You see that right there?
Mm-hmm.
It says this disqualifies all rivers originating from rain and snow as the rivers from Eden. There was no rain, as there was a mist that came up from the earth in those days. Nile, Tigris, Euphrates, Amazon, etc. all originate in rain and snowfalls. That's another thing to think about. We're looking at this geographically. the type of rivers, and we know that where we live at on the East Coast, that I know when North Carolina gets a abundance of snow or rain, guess what? The rivers here where we're at, they'll all swell up. Matter of fact, my brother owns a beach house, not a beach house, I'm sorry, a river house. That's off of what's the name of that river right up the road from us?
Edisto?
Edisto. Yes, thank you. So the Edisto River, based upon what's happening up above us, my brother's entire property, and that's why all the houses out there on the river are all off the ground, because it's literally the river has risen to the point where it's up to the bottom of the house.
And it's
So
probably
anyway,
on stilts.
yes, it is on stilts for that reason. So I remember one time we went out to his house, we had to take a boat from about 400 yards away from his house just to get to his house. So it's pretty crazy to think about. So again, just referencing back in here. So as we're going through this study, and if anybody is following along with us and you're looking at the maps, if you went back and you've downloaded where we're reading out of, and you start studying this, you start understanding that there was no rain before in those days. It was mist from the ground. Then you had rivers that were created from snow, rain, etc. So all these things kind of all factor into what we're reading right now. So, and Eden is not, I agree with you, Kyle. Eden is not where I thought the same thing. Eden was somewhere within, Israel somewhere, but that's not, according to this, that's not the case.
Up above the note that you read, it says pre-flood river from Eden surrounds the whole land of Ethiopia, which on maps from 450 BC to the 1800s was east to west coast. But it must surround all of Africa, so that's not the Nile.
So again, there's a lot to this. There's a lot packed into this chapter 8 right now. For anyone, if you want to go back and do a deep dive, go for it.
And it's odd how these areas where we're learning this information about just happens to be off limits to the general public.
How convenient.
How convenient, right? You can go to the North Pole, but you go to the North Pole that they tell you is the North Pole.
Yes, that is correct.
And, guided expeditions, all that kind of stuff. You're not going to go just explore anything. In addition to that, you can't go to the South, quote unquote, pole.
Right.
No, our Antarctica is off limits completely unless you are a government entity of some kind.
Or if you're the Pope, you can go there to visit.
Yeah. Well, he's a government entity, right?
That is correct. Yes.
So,
yeah.
I find those things not just odd. I don't think there's any coincidences to that whatsoever. I believe that they are again intentionally trying to hide the Father's creation. So
absolutely. Well, when we look at, and this isn't, if you're watching this isn't about us trying to prove flat Earth or round Earth or anything else. This is strictly stating the facts that North Pole, if we looked at flight patterns, how much faster it would be to get to other destinations if we just flew right over the pole. And you're literally right there instead of flying, whether we're a flat disc or we're concave or whatever it is. It just seems that the shorter distance would be that way, but that's pretty much off limits. There's no commercial flights that are taking that path that I personally know of. And the same with the South Pole is you like Kyle said, back in the day, the 70 nations got together, all of them for some reason could then sing Kumbaya together and be all united as one to agree that that it was all off limits and all this other stuff. So again, it just tells me, and I agree with you guys, that there's something they're hiding. I believe that whatever is in the North Pole or whatever is in the South Pole, that I believe actually would reveal our Father. I believe it would make people go, wait a minute, if that exists, then maybe this exists, and maybe this is true. And wait a minute, I remember hearing about this in the Bible. And by the way, and then all of a sudden it just starts to unravel for them. So I think that, and especially whatever is the South Pole, whether it's a wall, guys, or whether we're flat, round, whatever's there, they have cut public off completely to it. And again, when you look at when they do have visits to the South Pole, it's this little bitty piece on the map. It's this little bitty area that they'll allow you to go to, and that's it.
Yeah.
It's right off of Brazil, somewhere in that vicinity, and that's it. And they call that the South Pole, and that's all you're ever shown. That's nothing more, nothing less. So
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah, no, that area down there is yeah, Chile and Argentina down there at the bottom. But yeah, they definitely that's a quick little skip down there, and then that, like you said, that's all that you're allowed to see as a tourist or in the public. But speaking of land masses, what I thought was interesting was in 17, it says that this portion came forth by Lot. And I thought that was really cool, just because then there was no partiality. There was no, well, he got the better piece, or you love him more or love him less, or,
right.
God favored one more than the other. There really was no issue with that. But then, to see Noah's response, he rejoiced that the portion came forth for Shem. So there's something about Shem already early on, in the story, that Shem's a little set apart. Shem's got a little bit of something that Noah was excited about. And it says, there at the end of 18, the end of that page there, 97, it says, blessed be Yahuwah Elohim of Shem, and may Yahuwah dwell in the dwelling of Shem. And that, it really lets you kind of see into maybe a little bit more of the character of Noah and a little bit more of the character of Shem. Who's playing what roles, what is some future implications. You see that, like, I love to see kind of like the origin stories of some of these things that we were familiar with, but now we have like the deeper understanding, or now we get to see a little bit, maybe behind the wall on some of these stories. So I thought that was really cool.
So this portion came forth by lot, meaning, and I'm taking this as if casting lots,
Mhm.
Yeah.
right? Do you see any significance or correlation to the casting of lots for Yeshua's garments?
I think, just speaking off the top of my head, casting lots was something that was common practice used by everyone. It wasn't just one sect of people. When who was it? No, or Jonah was cast off the ship. They were casting lots to see who was the guy that had sinned that brought all this, upon them. I also know this to be a fact today, that there are people in the Torah observant walk who still cast lots. Me and Vicky have a friend of ours that when she's making major decisions in her life, she will cast lots and do it. She has a certain way that she does it, and to her, that's her way of God answering her.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So maybe we don't need to dive too much into this, but I can see how casting lights could be used for a selection process, which is just a
Mhm.
simple, all right, we got to divvy this up. We don't know how to do this fairly, so let's rock, paper, scissors, right? Let's
Yeah.
that's or draw straws or cast
Yep.
lots just to make this fair, right? That makes sense. But I can see how it can be used also in other ways where it can be more of a
Like using it as like a dividend or something like that.
yeah,
Divine.
divination
Yeah.
or somehow planning your future or future telling or something like that. You know what I mean?
Right.
I see
Like
Right.
looking at the tea leaves or reading the bones, or all
yeah.
that kind of stuff that we see down the other side, and the stuff that they use it for, maybe
I
more
got to be.
nefarious purposes.
That is actually something I've thought about over the years of my life as a Christian. That it's brought up different times in the Bible and by people. Um, it's never seemed to be in a bad way, and so to speak. It almost seems like this is common practice. So I've never really been set one way or the other if it was a bad thing. I guess anything could be made bad. Anything that we do can be taken too far or done in a way that that we're now allowing God to be a part of whatever that decision is. Like for our friend who does it, she's praying to God. She showed us how she does it, and I was like, well, I don't really have anything to come against you. I don't have anything to come against her with on that, good or bad, because I'm like, that's between you and Jehovah, and if you're doing something you're not supposed to be, then I trust that He will let you know.
I guess
But
my only concern would be like, how do you know? Like, if we're trying to make a decision and we're praying and okay, Father, I'm going to cast these lots, and whatever they land on, that's what I'm going to go on, because I believe that's what you are leading me to do.
Right.
Well, we don't have anything that tells us that that's a thing that the Father does.
Right.
Number
Let
one.
me
And number two, how would we know that any decision that's made would absolutely be coming from him?
let me ask you this. When they were picking the new disciple after Judas died,
Hmm.
did they cast lots?
Yeah, so that idea of casting lots, like I said, I think I kind of agree with Kyle's initial proposal, his proposed thought, and just saying that, when it's used to choose between something where they could be shown partiality or where it could be shown favoritism, I think that's where it plays more of like a numbers game, a statistical probability type of deal versus, Lord, help me make a decision. Let the dice tell me what to do, or let the sticks tell
Right.
me what to do. That's more looking to them for wisdom or advice versus just let's randomize the thing. Today we can rock paper scissors or hit the random button on the computer. But to Joe, to your point, there is that example with the disciples. It's in Acts chapter 1, verse 23 through 26 is the reference point. But it says that the 11 remaining apostles cast lots to determine whether to select Matthias or uh, Barsabbas, or his other name was Justice. And again, I think the reason for that was they didn't want to show favoritism. So there was two options. Which one do we pick? They're both great. Whichever
They're
one we
both
end up with,
qualified. Yeah.
yeah, whatever one we end up with is going to be great. Not going to be any problems. But if they were to pick one, that means they're not picking the other.
Right.
Versus if the dice roll, no one's getting unselected. There's just the probability played out, and you were the one picked. So there's no
Right.
feelings hurt, but there's also no one getting big head, boastful, lifted up because they got chosen over another.
Right. And I think for the same thing, if you were casting lots to make a decision as well. I mean, I guess you're gonna look at it that way. If you're making a decision, should I do X, A, or B? And you cast it lots, hoping that would be, I don't know. It's one of those things where it's like I just stay away from it personally. I don't want to get caught up in that myself, but it is there. It is in the Bible, multiple places through Old and New Testament. So
Yeah, and a lot of times it does seem to deal with like people and like relationship. In order to not
right.
hurt or anything like it wasn't like let's cast lot. Oh, I guess it was for the scapegoat. I think they cast lots for which one got to be the scapegoat, right?
I think so, yeah.
Which one got to be slaughtered and which one got to get sent out. So I don't
Yeah.
know.
So I think there's a little bit more to it. We'd have to do some more research on that to kind of see what the history and what the full meaning behind all this was. As like I said,
Mhm.
anything that, even let's say the casting of lots is God's, like I'm okay with it. But again, we know how man is and how they can pervert anything. The enemy can pervert anything that's good. So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah. So we just need to be careful about those kind of things. Hey guys, if you're enjoying the content so far and you'd like to continue studying along with us, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell.
Yeah, so starting off in 19, it starts off saying that, and he knew that the Garden of Eden is the Holy of Holies. So I just thought that to be very profound and very interesting that, Noah, whether it be passed down orally, whether he knew personally or whatever form that he was able to, ascertain that information, that he was able to recognize that, and that it was something that would have been available to him for knowledge wise. We don't know geographically or any means like that, but just the fact that he knew that was a special and set apart place, and that it goes on to tell us so many of the big major mile markers of Scripture that we talk about Mount Zion, Mount Sinai, the garden, that these three things, where it says at the end of verse 19, it says, and these three were created as holy places facing each other. And what it means by facing each other, I'm not really sure. I think it's really good language. I think it's something that we should spend some time looking into. I love that we have this community where we can all share and learn things together. So as you guys are learning with us online, we hope that we can come to some kind of fun conclusions there. But definitely just to see Mount Sinai being where Moses spent time with the Father, Mount Zion where Yeshua is coming back down, and we're going to see that new heaven, new earth, play out there in Revelation. There's just so much really cool language there, and that Noah's all the way back to Noah, that we're seeing all that play out, and the beginnings of all that.
Yeah, and I think it's really cool. We have these three locations, and while we do have some geographical locations that are called Mount Sinai today and Mount Zion today. Maybe some of those things are still here. Maybe some of those things are not. So something that we will probably dive a little bit further into. Something I did want to bring up is over here on the side. Now, remember, guys, this particular PDF is a collection of information that these particular people have put together. This is their thoughts and their beliefs over here in the notes, right, about what they believe this stuff means, what their interpretation of this scripture is saying to them. I don't necessarily agree with everything that they say. I think they've got some really good information that they point out, but I don't necessarily agree with everything that they have to say here. So I'll give you an example. Over here on the left, it says Noah affirms Shem's territory as essentially Asia. Yahuwah has a permanent Holy of Holies on earth in the land of the Garden of Eden. It continues to this day. Now, that's not something that I agree with. The Holy of Holies is something that is in it's in the tabernacle, right? The Yeshua is our high priest, and he is currently making atonement for us, and he is serving the role as the high priest for us currently right now, and we know that he's doing that in the heavenlies. Therefore, if the Holy of Holies is the Garden of Eden, therefore it must be where Yeshua is. So Yeshua is not on earth with us right now, right? So if he's not here with us, then therefore it can't be there. Now there's other things that lead to where is the Garden of Eden? Where has the Garden of Eden been? There's lots of information that we can dive into a little bit later on about the location and where places it has moved to and from and that sort of thing. I think we're going to dive into some of that a little bit later on. But Joe, why don't you give us kind of your take on the whole Garden of Eden situation?
Sure. Yeah, I believe that the Garden of Eden became Sheol, where there was the two parts of Sheol with a chasm in the middle, where you had the place where we say the bad guys went, and on the other side of that, I believe, is where the actual garden where Adam and Eve were kicked out of.
So
Um,
paradise.
yes, paradise.
There you go.
And when we go back and Paul says, "I neither know of the man in spirit or in the physical or whatever." That he went to the third part of heaven, and he said, then he saw paradise there, and we know that paradise is a word used for the Garden of Eden. So anyway, I believe that the garden was removed prior to the flood taking place. I believe that it still is a place of a holy place. And that when Christ went to Sheol, took back the keys of death, hell, and the grave, and he says he set the captives free. I believe those captives were set free, went to the third part of heaven, which is also called paradise. So, like you said, it's an interesting topic to get into at another time. So we won't go too deep into it tonight.
Yeah, I think that's a line of thought that not a lot of people have really gone down. Most people will either believe that it's still here and we're just not able to go see it, or it's still here but it's somehow invisible and we can't see it,
Right.
or because that's a theory, right?
Yeah, kind of like
Um,
Wakanda.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Or maybe that's where they got the idea for that. I don't know.
Probably. It's under a dome. Think about it.
Yeah, you never know,
Nah,
man. And they
Yeah.
have
maybe
all this
so.
technology, and it's a
Yep.
beautiful place. And yeah, yeah,
That's cool. That's cool.
yeah.
Okay, so nothing new under the sun, right?
Nope.
Okay, so then there's what? There's theories that there's the idea that the garden or paradise is
Hmm.
in the heavenlies. Um, but I think the part that you mentioned there is something that not a lot of people have considered, and that is what happened to the garden um, when the flood came. Right?
Yep.
Where was it? Where was it moved to? If it was moved, where was it moved to? Um, Was it taken to the heavenlies at that point, or was it taken somewhere else temporarily until Yeshua came and set them free? So I think that's a line of thought that not a lot of people have considered. And I
Yeah,
think that is something that we definitely need to dive into quite a bit more in future videos. So,
absolutely.
guys, I think probably some of you guys out there are probably going,
Yeah,
with this information. So tell us your thoughts down in the comments. We're going to
Yep.
explore. We're going to explore a lot of stuff in this subject. So it ought
yeah.
to be really cool.
I just want to say one more thing too on the Holy of Holies, Kyle. That anywhere Yahuwah shows up, anywhere that he deems to be holy. So I don't think it necessarily has to be the tabernacle for the Holy of Holies. When we had our earthly tabernacle, the inner court, the inner part of that was called the Holy of Holies. When Moshe was up on Mount Sinai with the Father, he said, "Hey, take off your sandals, for the ground you're standing on is hallowed, is holy."
Hmm.
And so that could be considered a Holy of Holies of type place. Um, so anyway, just throwing a little bit more out there that I think that anywhere that God establishes himself that this is his, it becomes then holy.
Yeah, holy. I do think there is some distinction there between holy and holy of holies. I think that is. I think that's probably why we have that specific mentioned, our specific place.
Right.
Whether it be in the tabernacle, the temple, or whatever, I believe that there is a reason for it specifically being called what it is, because
Right.
it does get show a separation between that which is holy. This
Hmm.
is the holy of the holy. This is the
Right.
separated of the separated. This is the
Right.
right.
Well, that's
There's a very very specific thing there. So yes,
right. Well, in verse 19, the reason why I say it because it's called in the garden part of Eden the Holy of Holies.
right.
And so I think that's why there's an establishment of this was something very special because guess what? Adam, his first, first man on earth, so to speak. That was a very special place to Abba that he got to watch Adam and Eve, from if I don't know if they were created from, or I don't know if Adam was created from a little baby or not, but or if he was a grown man, but I'm assuming he must have been full grown, but we
Yeah,
don't know. But that was a very special place that Abba says, this is where I would tabernacle with Adam and with Hava.
I got something I want to show. Okay, so I had to pull this up. And just so everybody is aware where I'm getting this information, if you would like more information about this,
Mm.
look in the description below and go to check out project314.org. There's a gentleman by the name of Andrew Hoy. He put this information together, and basically what he did is he took the concept or the idea of the tabernacle, the instructions that were given on how to construct the tabernacle, and he recognized a flaw in the typical shoebox style
Hmm.
version that we see today. And the flaw is, in order for that version to work, um, you have to add stuff to God's instructions. So
Mm.
that's the first thing. And then there's quite a few other. There's tons of reasons why it's a horrible design. If the way that they show it today is the shoebox design, if that was the design, that just would be a horrible, horrible design. Well, so he applied pi to the instructions that the Father gave us, and what he come up with is this. If you look in the top right corner, it gives you a much larger structure, and this is without adding to or taking away from the word of the Father on how to construct the tabernacle.
Mhm.
So you have this dome, if you will, right?
Mm.
Mm, yeah, right. So if we think biblical cosmology, what is everything modeled after, right? So we have this dome here, right? And then when everything is applied, and this is just kind of a sketch over here. By the way, you can check out Project 314 um, on YouTube as well. And there's some really cool He did a very in-depth interview with Rob Skiba a while back, and you really ought to check that out regarding the tabernacle. So check that out, project314.org. We'll leave a link down in the description. But over here on the bottom left corner here, you'll see this diagram. So this is kind of the see-through version, right? If looking down into the tabernacle. Well, this larger ring here would be the holy place. This center area would be the Holy of Holies. So, when we are reading that scripture that we just read, let me escape out of this and go back over here. And he knew that the Garden of Eden is the Holy of Holies and the dwelling of Yahuwah, and Mount Sinai, the center of the desert, and Mount Zion, the center of the navel of the earth. These three were created as holy places facing each other. So when I look at that, and the holy places, the Holy of Holies being in the center, it looks exactly like what the tabernacle looks like if you look at it as a round tabernacle. Isn't that interesting? I'll show you that one more time. I thought that was really cool. So anyway, guys, wealth of information. You really ought to check out what he has going on. So I'll leave that.
Fascinating.
Hey, guys, we really hope you are enjoying studying the book of Jubilees here with us at Anchor to Truth. One of the things that we want to do is we want to make sure that we keep our content in manageable bite-sized pieces. So we don't really want to go much over the 30-minute mark with our videos. Because of that, and because we dove so deep into this chapter, we're going to have to give you a third part. So with that said, we will see you next time for part 3 in chapter 8 in the book of Jubilees. God bless.